Hello everybody and welcome to Absolutely Marvel in DC. Today it is myself, Dylan, and Sal, and we are going to be talking about the MCU. But first, today's show is brought to you by G Fuel. Use code COMICS at checkout, save 10% on your order. Now, so today's topic, we are going to be talking about the MCU and what exactly is the MCU. Because we've got, the MCU started off Marvel Cinematic Universe. We had our different movies. We had Captain America, Thor, Iron Man. It eventually became this massive universe. And then eventually we started getting TV shows and other things outside of just the movie universe, as well as things getting changed around. And so I kind of had this thought of what exactly is like the MCU. Are we considering it just one entire universe at this point? Are we talking about different subsections of a universe? Because it's very unclear at times what is connected, what isn't connected, and what's being implied as connected. So first off, I want to ask you guys, what would you say the MCU is? Like, if someone were to say, hey, just what's the MCU?
Right.
It's the movies.
Right. If yeah, I mean, like the MCU, because the C stands for cinematic. I mean, the original conceit of the MCU was just the movies, and I think we can't ignore the shows now. You know, like the shows are part of the MCU. Right. The MCU is
they very clearly are.
All of this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right, exactly. And now that they've introduced the multiverse, it's like, well, now like the Fox X-Men are part of the MCU, and Spider-Man,
right?
Raimi is from the MCU. Like, except he's not, but like he's a Marvel Legends figure now, so it's like, okay, I guess that means
that's
part
where
of
the trouble starts.
And that's where the trouble starts.
What
right?
does it all
it's
mean?
Like, right. What does it all mean? And I will tell you this: the only people who aren't thinking about that are the people involved in creating the MCU.
Correct.
They couldn't care less. And they're expecting nerds like us to define it for them.
Right.
So that they can try and so they can complain about how people are putting words in their mouths about what they're doing. And that's the worst of it, is where they don't care. They're like, we used it as a marketing tool, but like, I don't really care what it actually means, because at the end of the day, like, all it is just stuff I taped to my trailer wall for like the project I'm working on in Georgia that week. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, like, that's up to us to define what the MCU is.
I think that was like never more clear than when so Far From Home was the first time where it's like, oh, maybe they're doing multiverse. Oh, they name dropped 616. That's fun.
Right.
But then you finish that movie and it's all fake, and Mysterio's just making nonsense up because he's Mysterio.
Right.
Right. But then except you skip ahead a few years, and you go into Multiverse of Madness. And you're like, oh, well, okay, the MCU is 616?
Right, like, was Mysterio right? Is he prescient? Like, what does he know?
Is that just a crazy coincidence? Or did he just know somehow?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
no.
And I imagine Feige going, what?
Right.
Who cares?
Nobody cares, and that's the thing, is like, and what you were saying, Sal, about like nobody at the top actually gives a shit, and it's just down to us. Like, I've seen so many Twitter arguments of people being like, no, there's two sides. It's like, this doesn't make sense. This is stupid. It's an affront to me as a comic book fan and somebody who read a wiki entry once. And then there's the other side where it's like, no, it's the multiverse. It's a different thing, and it's like it doesn't matter. It's a number. No. Who cares?
Right. Like, it doesn't matter. But you know, for the sake of this show, we'll talk about whether it matters, or whether it's like a thing.
Because that's actually why I wanted to talk about it just in general, was because at the start of all of this, I feel like the MCU, it being one giant entity, mattered big time. Like, that's kind of what made a lot of the movies better, was because you knew they were all intermingling. You knew that something happening over here was going to affect the rest of it. And now we really have moved outside of we've moved outside of a single MCU. We've kind of gotten into a multiverse of MCU. because we've got like a animated cinematic universe, we've got like the TV cinematic universe, and we've now got the bleed over of things like you can't deny Charlie Cox is Daredevil in Spider-Man, the movies, but is also Daredevil now in the shows. And then the shows sprawl out because they're probably, I mean, the shows, Daredevil's not out yet, but they're most likely going to be bringing in Hawkeye, a lot of the other show entities and stuff like that. But I just think it's very interesting that we started off with this idea that there was just simply one cinematic universe, and it made everything. Sometimes it made things make sense a little bit more. Sometimes it made it make sense a lot less. But do we think that we're reaching the point that we should just kind of ignore it? Do we just kind of like move into the realm of like you said, Sal, let's let them decide what's in the same universe? Or do we kind of put our foot down of, okay, we've said there's a multiverse, we've name dropped that they are 616. Do we want to basically drive the car saying, hey, this is what the universe looks like. This is what the MCU actually is. You can go with this information as opposed to just, hey, we made these. Have fun filling in the blanks.
I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do, and they don't care what we have to say. We could make a definitive, like, comprehensive list. I mean, I'm sure people have made it already. I saw somebody made an entire movie out of all of the movies and shows. I saw that, Disney Plus has, like, a watch order in actual, like, chronological order, not just the release order, but chronologically released, and it's wrong. You know, like, I've seen all kinds of stuff that where they have tried to establish what the MCU is and what, you know, and what that means, and failed because they're not huge nerds, and the nerds themselves doing it and having them go, but we don't want, the reason why they don't care is because they don't want to be restricted. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be pigeonholed or stuck in a place where they have to be beholden to rules, which of course is ironic because part of the reason why we like anything is because there's a structure to them. Mm-hmm. You know, like the MCU itself is a cage in which we like keep all of these movies and stories that all take place presumably within the same universe, you know? But like that was broken the second Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. hit season 3. You know, and even then, and no one has said out loud, like, this is this and this is that. I mean, I remember when they were making the shows and Jeff Loeb would cross his arms and go like, you're trying to get me to say hashtag it's all connected and I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Dude, you did that when you were promoting the damn thing. Like, either it is or it isn't. Right, and they're like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be stuck in one place where I have to, where I have to acknowledge that stuff that has no bearing on what I'm doing happened. You know, and it's a complicated mess, and the bigger it gets, the more complicated it gets. That's how you get Ultimate Universes, like, because people get confused, and the publisher / creator distributor doesn't want to have to explain what that all means or where it all fits.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna bring up the Ultimate Universe also, because I think the MCU has reached a point now where it is just another universe in so much as like. It like with the Ultimate Universe, it was in the comic book medium, so you could still have that, and they did eventually cross that over with 616 and the rest of other comic book universes. But in the Marvel Comics multiverse, there is alternate versions of the Ultimate Universe. Right. So, like, I think that's where we are at this point now. Is like the MCU is both its own like insular thing that has developed enough canon to where we can spin off from it with What If and Freshman Year and stuff like that. And B, it's a term that if you slap on something, it will make more money and people will watch it more.
That's true. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, they want to live in both worlds, right? That's like that's Schrodinger's distribution plan. It's like they want to live in a world where they're like, if I use this term, I will guarantee a certain amount of money.
Mm. Yeah.
But I also don't want to have to like follow the rules that this thing implies because I didn't make them up.
I would be interested to see if now, because there have been MCU comic books, like Fury's Big Week is like the one that I can think of right now, but that was back when during like phase 1, phase 2 where
like the Marvel one-shots, like those little short films that also may or may not be in canon.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But like comic books specifically, I'm curious to see if they released a comic book now and they promoted it on like Disney Plus or something and said this is an MCU comic book. Right. I would be interested to see the numbers on that. Like,
I bet it doesn't do as well because it's like
I
like,
agree.
It's pulling teeth to get people to buy a comic book.
I'm curious to see where that line is of like where
if you made that comic book viewable on Disney Plus.
Right.
I would wonder.
Which is insane that they don't do that.
I just found out that Netflix sells merchandise. Like
On
Netflix has a store in the website.
Oh.
I did not know that.
Yeah, like you could buy Eddie Munson's shirt through shop.netflix.com, and I was like, what? Like, that's brilliant.
Yeah, Disney Plus should definitely sell comic books through.
Yeah, why doesn't Disney Plus get lumped with Marvel Unlimited?
Why not at the end of Hawkeye episode 1 when it's like watch the next episode or go read the comic book. Just click here and it comes up.
Yeah, just the first issue for free.
Yeah.
Ugh. Never.
It's actually kind of funny though that we're talking about that there are some comic books that go into the MCU because that's almost entirely counterintuitive that we're making comic books about the cinematic
about
universe.
The adaptations of them.
So it's just a very interesting one because I feel like you were saying, it both helps and hurts them when they say it's all connected because it makes them have to stay behind certain rules and certain status quos throughout what is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it also helps them in the sense of people like connectivity. People like having those little aspects where you can truly make like that small comment, name drop one person, and you're like, oh my gosh.
It's satisfying.
It's like you're being rewarded for paying attention. That's what it is. It's just you're being rewarded for being a fan / paying attention. Like because I mean, they do that all the time in movies and in structures for stories. Like it's called Chekhov's gun. You put it up here, you have it go off in the third act. Like you reference a thing. And Endgame, by the way, is choked with them. Constant like little lines and throwaway things that like. The casual observer might not recognize, but like the fact that Black Panther doesn't care that Hawkeye's name is Clint, and then he refers to him by name in Endgame, showing like there's a new connection. I'm like, that's something where it's cute, and it's one of those things that takes no effort to do, but people still don't do it, and when they do, it feels like. Not just you're being rewarded, but also that you can trust the filmmakers because they're at least paying attention.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they care about what they're making.
And it makes it far more interesting to like watch and pay attention to because it makes the world feel more lived in. Like
totally.
Like for someone right now who I just started reading comics again for the first time in like 6 months. And still, the only thing I care about right now really is X-Men and what's going on there because that's like. Right. That feels like Marvel to me. Like, Marvel hasn't felt like Marvel for a long time. And now I'm reading these books where it's like there's like 10 odd books that are all they're about different things, but they're all really about the same thing. And that's how the MCU felt for a long time, and still feels to an extent. Phase 4 kind of took a departure from there.
But they did it on purpose. Like it was a deliberate decision, right? Like they were like, because. I can imagine that maybe Phase 4 is their indulgence to go, that's done. Now we're in the it's over phase. Like we're in the the day after the funeral phase where it's like, what do we do with our lives? Like you'll forgive me if I act a little erratic because like I just lost something really important to me, And they're trying, it's growing pains. It's regrowth, actually.
Now that the multiverse is in continuity, like we've got the multiverse, do we think that it's going to help or hurt? And do we think that they're really going to venture into potentially going, hey, we are truly going to do this show in what we are making clear is a multiverse, like a different universe, so that we can kind of do our own thing while keeping semi in line? Because the nice thing about the Multiverse of Madness was that they showed that there are the counterparts. Like you do get this person is this, but there are the small changes of, Captain Marvel was I can't even remember who it was, but it was, I want to say Monica Rambeau's mother.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Maria Rambeau.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, do we think that it could potentially help some of these shows if they decided to go, this truly is a different universe, and now when we make these name drops, we can provoke the viewer into wondering, who is it?
Right,
Which version are we talking about in this? Does it actually even matter? Or
that seems dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
And I said, by the way, in total lowercase letters, like this is not dangerous in any significant way. Yeah, we're really in charge. Like, no, I think it's playing with fire when it comes to what they're doing, because like they have done something that no one has been able to achieve in like film, and they should be proud of that. But they also should be precious with it. This whole multiverse thing. Needs to have actually, I would say, more of a plan than Phase 1, 2 for the MCU, because you could.
It needs to matter.
It needs to matter, and it needs to be clever. It needs to be smart, because I firmly believe Secret Wars is going to have incursions, and we're going to see like the Fox X-Men and like the Fanforstic, or at least like Chris Evans as the Human Torch. Like we're going to see the Marvel films on planets. Characters cross over and smash into each other, or versions of those characters. Right. And if they're not careful, it will appear bloated and self-indulgent, and there's no good reason to do it. And so you need to justify it with a really good reason. And you need to have it like, so if there is going to be crossover and cross-pollination, if you're going to have characters like hop over and end up here forever, like it needs to be well executed, and it needs to be earned and beloved by the audience. And I don't, and Phase 4 does not give me hope on that. And that's the concern, is that like, if you do that, you also irreparably change the MCU, and the MCU doesn't mean the same thing anymore.
Right.
Because now the MCU is a grab bag of stuff you like.
Right. And that's the trouble with me, is like you can either do multiverse as a plot point, which I think we saw that in No Way Home, where it's like it's used as a device to further a story that would have already happened. It just strengthened it.
Totally.
Or you can do it like with another Spider-Man property. It seems like they're doing with freshman year, where it's like we're just gonna throw this in the MCU, in the MCU's multiverse, just because it'll probably make us more money. And maybe that's the story we want to tell, but like. The way that I see that is now you're just restricting yourself in weird ways, where it's like, okay, Doctor Strange is going to come back. Cool. Yeah. And I guess that's fine, because maybe we can get Benedict Cumberbatch back, but we can't get Tom Holland back.
Or Robert Downey Jr.
And also Nico Minoru is in here. And of course we can't use Iron Man and Captain America because they're dead in the MCU, and we don't want to like tarnish that. But like if it wasn't an MCU show, then they could do whatever they want. Right. But now they can't, because it's an MCU show.
But I don't even think it has to do with the fact that it's an MCU show. I think freshman year is baffling because, like, I don't know why they're doing it or what it means or what they're, like, because they already did that. Like, they've made at least one other cartoon show that's supposedly, like, an adaptation of the MCU Spider-Man, or at the very least, like, it's Marvel Spider-Man, right? That was that show with, like, the weird animation. And it was like, oh, is this like kind of their version of the MCU Spider-Man, but like not really? This show is just, I think, indicative of the problem and the concerns people have about the multiverse being introduced, is because you're complicating it. You had people, not too many people, because look, Endgame made like $1 gazillion. Like enough people went and go see these movies. Okay, these movies make $1 billion. Not every movie makes $1 billion. That means that more than the average cinema goer goes to see these movies. But there is a subset of the population who is against the MCU, or at the very least not interested in it, and for more than just the reasons of they don't like comic book movies or they don't like Marvel. It's because they're like, this is too complicated for me. How many times have you heard out loud people say, like, I'm not going to watch 26 movies to understand what this one movie is? Right. And it's like, that mentality, like, is understandable and shouldn't be ignored necessarily, but at the same time, you're not going to help by complicating it by being like, well, okay, so this movie has Patrick Stewart Professor X, but it's not like the one you know. It's like kind of like him, but in a different universe.
You also have
where
to
like
watch all that,
right? Like or not, because it's like no, he is like the same Professor X from those movies, but like, he's not. Like he's actually like if those movies also took place in this universe, and it's like what?
I think that's we're getting to a dangerous point with the MCU now. Where like, and this is the thing. This is a dangerous. This time it's capitals. We're getting to a point now with the MCU where the comics have been at for a while, where like the people at the top are like, we need those new readers, and it's nobody cares.
No, you don't.
Just make the shit, and people will like. You don't. People who read comics, and comics are very difficult to get into if you don't have somebody else telling you what to do.
Yes,
and that's tough, and that sucks. And I think we're sort of getting to that point in the MCU now where it's like it has this sort of like mystique about it, where it's like, oh, it's all connected and it all matters, and each movie is a sequel to the last. Where it's like really, especially in Phase 4, I'll give it this: you can watch kind of most things in Phase 4 without prior knowledge.
That's true.
And a lot of them are good like Shang-Chi and stuff like that. Like,
you don't really need
just jump in and watch that movie, and it's like, it'll go somewhere later. Yeah. And I think that's like but I'm worried that's like maybe they did this in an effort. It's like, oh, we got to get those new viewers.
Yeah,
no, you don't.
Yeah, and it's funny because like bringing it into what we're doing professionally. I remember watching a thing just recently where they're like for content creators, where it's like, don't try and chase trends or like what will get viral or what the most amount of viewers are watching, because then you won't be able to actually cultivate an audience. And it's like that's what Marvel did. Marvel comics / cinematic universe, or the movies, like Iron Man is not like for everybody, No, it's open enough to be for everybody. Like it's not impenetrable, but it's not trying to be everything. It's just trying to be itself as best as possible, and that's when it works. Like people,
totally.
I'm seeing a second renaissance for Ant-Man movies now. People are like, I love Ant-Man movies, and I'm like, good for you, because those movies are unapologetically Ant-Man movies. They're they are about Ant-Man, and they're not like, oh no, like there's a sequence in which like Falcon shows up in the first Ant-Man, and it's not like he's overdoing it, or it's like he now takes over the movie, and it's like, okay, well now it's a Falcon movie. Like it's just a fun sequence.
Right.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that this is a definitively Ant-Man movie. And people like it, and people respond to it. And, it's just all it had to do was exist for the audience to eventually find it. Yeah.
Right.
And that's all Marvel needs to do, is just make shit people like, and eventually we'll like it all.
So I think it's pretty safe to say then that Marvel's kind of almost in like a fine line area right now of almost getting too close to overcomplicating everything to the point that no one's really going to want to dive in.
Yes.
But also wanting to kind of re-simplify things so that they can get the new people while keeping the old to go, oh, okay, the incursions happened, everything just got merged. If someone wanted to jump on, they could jump on for this, because you don't need to know what's before if you're here for the merge and forward. Yeah. And then if you're curious, you can go back and go, oh, this is where these different things came from.
Oh, I could very easily see the end of Secret Wars being a kind of like the end of it being this kind of like explosion where you see all these characters, like the first issue of 1984 Secret Wars, where it's like, but it's like Inhuman, X-Man, Mutant, Street Level,
just
Superhero, everyone just exploding at the screen. Like, now we can do all of it, and we can do it again. Like, and I don't know if I necessarily want to reboot, but they could do it where it's like, this is the start of something where it's like, you'll never be rid of it, and it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's because
like the death of phases. Like this, Marvel
phases
just
are over
now.
Yeah, Marvel is now a genre. It is done. Like, there are going to be shows, cartoons, movies, and it's all connected. And we have like 3 people who are in charge of it who make sure that it all syncs up. But even at the end of the day, who gives a shit?
Right.
And that's it. Like, and that'll be that. And I don't know if I don't know if that's exciting or not. But like,
You've just described comic books.
But that's comic books, right?
Right.
It's like, you better get on board because, yeah, comic books are great, and they don't necessarily hurt as bad as, like, waiting 6 years for a sequel for a movie you're never going to get.
Right. Fair enough.
Okay. Well, I think that kind of hits every single point. Let us know in the comments down below what you guys think. Should they keep the multiverses separate? Should they mash it into one, kind of do a reboot? Let us know what you think down below. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit that 100,000 subscriber mark. Help us do that, and check out G Fuel. Use the code COMICS at checkout. Save 10% on your order. We will see you guys next time.
Bye.